Peace and love, everybody, and welcome back to another Sunday Hope and Healing session. I'm Royce Fletcher Thomas, the host of the Sunday Hope and Healing session, where we use certainly words to encourage you and give you a sense of hope and upliftment, things that I share based on insights that I've gained in my own life journey, things that have been a blessing to me along the way and that I share and pass on to you in hopes that they may be a blessing to you as well. And we actually provide actual healing, which we do through utilization of a technology or a technique referred to as transcending the matrix, which is really a holistic approach to healing. It addresses a person's spirit, mind, body, emotions, the totality of one's life experience, right? And so my apologies. It is now almost 1:45 Eastern time. We usually go live at 1 Eastern. I even posted something on Facebook saying we will be going live and attempted to do so on YouTube. However, it never posted. Anyway, we're having some internet challenges and started like right before starting time to broadcast and went through all of the troubleshooting things called customer service. They went through all the troubleshooting things. They scheduled for a technician to come out today. Technician's still scheduled. They haven't been here yet, but the internet magically started working again. So anyway, we're here. We'll just be here for a few short moments today. I don't plan to be a full hour today. But we do have a topic for today, and the topic for today is when the healer needs healing or when the caregiver needs care. This was born out of my own transparency. Actually, I always pray on what to do, what the focus will be for the Sunday Hope and Healing session. And today I was challenged with something I didn't really want to do. Oh, yes. I was challenged with something I didn't really want to do, and that was to kind of confess in the spirit of transparency. I actually became the healer that needed healing, right? So I've been running, burning the candle from both ends. I was at this conference. We broadcasted very briefly from the conference. And wonderful conference at Unity Village in Lee's Summit, Missouri. This was, the conference was called Celebrating Our Souls, sponsored by the People of African Descent New Thought Group. I was blessed to be on a panel at this event. There are a lot of other wonderful people, wonderful people at this event. And for quite a while before that, I had been burning the candle from both ends. Once I got there, I was burning the candle from both ends. Ended up getting COVID, right? And so, and I didn't even know that was the case. I had a roommate there, and my roommate texted me while I was stuck in transit in Atlanta due to flight complications and then storm here in Tampa where I now live. So I ended up being stuck in Atlanta for a couple days and found out while I was there that at that point, I wasn't just feeling run down because I hadn't been resting. I had been burning the candle from both ends. But I actually ended up testing positive for COVID, right? And didn't have the energy to work on myself. Yeah, that's the real truth. And to be quite frank, I felt embarrassed about having it in the first place because I'm a healer. Not only am I a healer, I am a teacher of healers, right? And so I felt a little embarrassed to even ask anybody to send some healing energy my direction. And then as I would have a little bit of energy, I would do a little bit of work on myself. But I know that I feel like this is a topic that other people may be able to relate to also, because there are people whose nature is to care for others, to tend to others. Um, I'm not the only one. I know that there are people who are in situations where maybe you're a caregiver for a loved one. Maybe that is the line of work that you're engaged in. You know that doctors have a shorter life expectancy than the rest of the general population. There are a couple different theories I have on that. I'm just putting that out there as a statement for right now, however. But the reality is that people who care for other people need care too. People who are healers need healing too, and it's really important for those of us who are healers to engage in self-healing, ideally to engage in preventative self-healing rather than waiting until something's going on and then you trying to muster up the energy to do healing on yourself, right? Because it makes it a little bit harder to do when you don't have the energy or the focus or whatever to be able to do healing on yourself the way that you normally would on other people, right? And so I end up doing a self-healing. And one of the things that I find to be a challenge in doing healing on myself is I usually remember what it is that came up. And so then sometimes get a little in my head about it. I set it up quite some time ago. This is over 20 years ago. I set it up to like when I'm working on somebody, there are different things that are going to come up, right? There are different things that are really at the root of whatever the person's health condition or whatever the person's malady is. And so as those things will come up, I'll address it with the healing. And most of the time, all of this is silent, right? I'll address it with the healing. And as it comes up, it's gone from me because as it's healed, I'm not holding on to it. I don't want them to be thinking about it because I don't want them recreating this in their mind. So like in the Bible, there would be times where Jesus would do a healing on people and then he would say, now go and sin no more. Now, a lot of times we put that terminology in a moral context. The concept of sin, we usually think of morally. The way that I think of sin, however, isn't simply from a moral. Now, it can have moral implications, no doubt. But I'm not putting in that context so much as what the term really means is missing the mark, right? And a way that I relate that in today's terms that I think that people can kind of identify with and relate to is brokenness. Okay, so in other words, what he was saying is now don't go engaging in the same type of brokenness that put you in this situation in the first place. And so the things that we do that qualify as sins, if you will, are things that we're doing out of our brokenness, right? Rather than from a space of wholeness or well-being in our heart, mind, body, and soul, right? And so I don't want to, all of the problems that we experience physically and otherwise are ultimately in our mind. I'm going to make that as an emphatic statement. You may agree with it, you may disagree with it. I'm just telling you what I see. And over 20 years of doing this work, there's always something that's deeper at the root, right? And so once that root issue is resolved, the outer experience of whatever that malady or condition is ends up being resolved. And so at any rate, sometimes when I'm doing healing on myself, I'll be thinking about it. It's a little bit more difficult to be neutral, right? Because the neutrality matters. You know, being non-attached to the outcome matters. It makes it easier to be a clean and clear vessel. for the healing, right? But when I'm doing that on myself, sometimes that's just a little bit more difficult, particularly in a situation where something has already happened and I'm trying to resolve it. Okay. And so, at any rate, I was doing some work on myself, and something came up that really surprised me. And what it was that surprised me was fear of being a healer, right? Now, I've been a healer for a little while now. Let me say, ultimately, God is the healer. So let's keep that in context. I'm a vessel of healing. I've been a vessel of healing for quite a while now, and have been training other people to be healers for quite a while now, for over 20 years now, right? And so it was interesting that this particular thing came up. Now, let me put it in the context. In the context, I had just been at this conference with all of these wonderful, wonderful, beautiful people. And I had an opportunity to share. I spoke a total of maybe 10 minutes. 10 minutes tops. But everybody at the conference, who was in that session had an opportunity to hear what it was that I shared. And they appreciated what it was that I shared. Even Michael Beckwith, the minister over at Agape International Spiritual Center in LA, made a point to say some very complimentary things to me, and I appreciated that. And this was in the context of me being a healer, because the panel that I was on was the health and wholeness panel. And shout out to Reverend Shirley Price Lawson, who is an initiate of Transcending the Matrix, who actually, just to put it frankly, hounded me about being a part of this, because she felt like it would be a blessing to the people and it would be a blessing to me. Anyway, so I had the opportunity to share, and a lot of people were inspired and everything. Greetings, Karen. Good to see you in the space today. And so I found it interesting when I was just doing this healing on myself yesterday, I think it was, that fear of being a healer came up. And again, it was in the context of people seeing, of a whole collection of people seeing and experiencing me as a healer. A lot of people were asking about information about transcending the matrix. And then here I am. I end up getting COVID, and I'm kind of wiped out and don't have much energy to do much anything, including like follow up with the people who are interested in learning more about transcending the matrix, right? And so there were some deeper underlining things. Keith Atkins, good to see you in the space, my brother. And yes, I'll make it happen for the first, I think, Saturday in September in Orlando. Correct me if I have the date wrong, but if I remember correctly, it was the first Saturday in September. So at any rate, I've noticed at different times in my life, as I looked back at it and kind of reflected a little bit, I noticed at different times in my life when there was opportunity to take another step forward in terms of spreading this work in a different way. There would always be something that would come up where I'd end up having some stuff going on, and, just to be real about it, would kind of sabotage it, self-sabotage, being able to spread this work in a new way, or to be able to do it, take it to another level, right? And so there were some unresolved fears from way before I was even born, right? From way before I was even born. And there may be some of you who might deal with some of those things. You might have some situations where you might yourself get stuck, or you might yourself find some challenge. You might be a person who cares for other people, but find it a little bit more easy to neglect yourself, right? You might be a healer of other people, but maybe don't take the time to do healing on yourself preventatively, or, once something actually happens, right? And so in that context, I'm going to take a few minutes. And again, we're not going to be a whole hour today. I don't think we are anyway. That's not my plan anyway. But we're going to go ahead and do some healing towards this end to support those who are healers, and being able to receive the healing that you need and that you deserve sometimes. Greetings. Ken, you, good to see you today, my brother. And for those who are caregivers, to be able to receive the care that you need. Okay, so I'm going to start with a prayer. God, I know you to be a healer. You are the source of all healing, and there's nothing, no problem, no malady, no health concern, or any other life concern that extends beyond your healing ability and power. And through the power of pure love, I give great thanks for the wonderful privilege of being able to demonstrate you as a healer on the behalf of all of those who are tuned into this broadcast and who choose to align themselves with this healing on today, for the purpose of neutralizing the root cause of all feelings of inadequacy, of unworthiness, and any other low vibrational, emotional block and unfruitful thought process and belief system regarding worthiness for our own healing, our own care. And transmuting that into and replacing it with being divinely aligned. Being divinely aligned according to the divine blueprint by which you created us to dwell in divine health and well-being, and to take the necessary and appropriate steps preventatively to support our well-being before any problem happens, and if any do arise, to be able to have the presence of mind, the self-love, and the humility to allow ourselves to receive the healing, even if it has to come through another vessel. And in those cases where we are able to, that we take the necessary steps within ourselves to do what needs to be done to support our own divine well-being. And I bear witness to our wholeness on this date and in this time and space called now. Thank you. Thank you, God, for this gift of your divine love. It is done. It is done. It is done. All right. So let's look at, I want to take a look at for a moment right now. Oh boy, already a lot of weaknesses and breaks coming up. Let's take a look at subconscious programming in our early childhood that would have us focus on the other and not focus on self, where we may have been socialized to sacrifice our own well-being for the well-being of others. To that point, I believe that there is value. Love actually will cause one to put someone else's needs in front of their own wants. It is not, however, an act of love to put somebody else's wants before one's own needs, right? And so let's look at the ability to identify one's own needs and strengthen us all to have a profound commitment to seeing to it that our genuine, authentic needs are met and fulfilled. Okay. and a deep, 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 deep commitment to that as an expression of self-love. Okay. All right. We want to neutralize any manipulation tactics that we experienced, perhaps from our caregivers when we were young, to sacrifice our own well-being, to put other people's interests ahead of our own, or ahead of our own authentic needs, whatever they may have been, and to forgive those who did that. And to be able to have peace with ourselves. Ooh, that's a big break. Let's strengthen that ability to have peace with ourselves and to have peace with them. All righty. And let's look at willingness to take responsibility for our own healing, for our own well-being, for our own care, without thinking that makes us selfish in some negative way. Okay, all right, that's looking better. Greetings, Reverend Shahira. Good to see you. You've been on my heart. Good to see you in the space today. All right, so let's look at, I want to look for a moment at psychic trauma. Psychic trauma from things that were experienced long, long ago, from those who are healers and those who were metaphysicians, those who thought differently than other people and related to the world in a different way, being traumatized and, in some cases killed, tortured, and other negative things. A thing came up, this was quite some time. Someone saw a situation where I was a healer and I would see. I was apparently a seer as well. And the powers that be at the time judged that as negative. And they saw someone having these like poker, kind of like the things that you have in the fireplace that you move the logs with, if you can relate to that. Something kind of like that they had on the fire, sitting on the fire, like these pokers, and they burned my eyes with these things. I saw this happening like in a past life for me, right? Well, shoot, that's traumatic, and that kind of thing can stick around with the soul, right? To this day, I actually still have a problem with seeing stuff happening with people's eyes. I remember seeing it was on like the science channel. This was years ago. Saw the science channel or something. And somebody was having eye surgery done. I couldn't watch it. I could not watch it. This was a long time ago. But anyway, let's look at unresolved trauma from whether ancestral or past life, where you may have been punished for being a healer, or you may have been ostracized, or the word is not coming to me, the word that I'm looking for, persecuted. You may have been persecuted for being a healer or for being a seer, right? Or you may have been in a situation where you are rewarded either then or now, where you are rewarded for sacrificing your own needs in favor of someone else's happiness, right? So we want to resolve that. We want to resolve that, bring some deep, deep, deep self-forgiveness. We want to realign or recalibrate. We want to recalibrate our perspective to be such that is alignment with the divine truth that exists within us rather than the programmed truth that we took on from other people in life circumstances and situations. All right, let's look at this idea, that this subconscious idea and belief system, that sacrificing your own needs or sacrificing your own well-being somehow makes you more righteous, that it somehow makes you a better person, that it somehow makes you more pleasing in the eyes of God. Big break there. And let's replace that with Moses said, and Jesus quoted it, that the greatest of the commandments is to love God with everything that's in you. And the second was like unto it, to love your neighbor as yourself. And so there's a key part that is kind of missed a lot of times, and that's the love yourself part. Okay, so let's look at strengthening the resolve to love self as a function of loving God. You see, it says, love God with everything that's in you and love your neighbor as yourself. So in a very real sense, it's impossible to fully love God without fully loving where God dwells, and God dwells in you, right? All right, so let's look at misguided beliefs about what genuine humility is. And we want to transmute that and replace that with what humility really, really is. Okay, so sometimes we're thinking that we're being humble. I told you I end up being at this conference and running myself, burning the candle from both ends, end up getting COVID, didn't have the energy to do healing on myself, and was too proud to ask anybody to support me in healing, right? Like I don't know healers, or I haven't trained a bunch of them who would have been happy to have done so. So let's look at neutralizing that false pride. Neutralizing that false pride and transmuting that into a sense of genuine, authentic humility. And, you know, when you're really in a space of humility, you truly recognize it isn't all about you all the time, right? You know, the reality, and I'm having this sober moment of thinking right now, in this moment. The reality is there are people who would have been honored to have supported me in that healing. That I robbed of the opportunity to have done that. There are people who've checked into this broadcast who might have been. All right, so let's look at strengthening. Let's look at strengthening our connection to the divine healer, who is God, right? All right, and with respect to that, subjecting our lower nature to the love and the grace and the power and the healing of God. All right. And so looking at the different ways that the ego might show up. Woo, Lord have mercy. The different ways that the ego might show up. That part of you that tries to edge God out. I was edging God out and didn't even realize, didn't have the presence of mind to actually even recognize it. Right? Okay, and so let's look at this is another pride thing. Thinking that we can always find a way to work out whatever our issue is. We don't need to do anything to make sure that we're cared for. Oh, Lord, I'm laughing, but it's really not funny. We can just go and go and go and go and go. And somehow we're just going to magically be okay, right? When the reality is, if you try that with your car and you don't refuel it, you're just driving and driving and driving, going, 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 and you don't refuel it, eventually that vehicle is going to stop working for you. It's not going to go anywhere. And we do that with our own, at least I have. And I believe if I have, then some of you perhaps have as well. All right. So let's look at commitment to recharging your own battery, refueling your own vessel. And that might come in a variety of forms. Like a lot of times people think of self-care from the standpoint, usually self-care is thought of as only something women do. And a lot of times it's just like getting your hair and your nails done, maybe getting a massage, right? Self-care is caring for oneself, which is a need that every human being has, that every soul in a body has, right? And to be able to care for one's own being, that can include some pampering, but certainly isn't limited to that. The deeper forms of self-care are making sure that you get what it is that you need for your soul. The deeper aspects of self-care are when you're tempted to keep going and going and going and going, to take the time and rest even when it's not convenient to do so. See, I was laid up on my back because I didn't have a choice. I didn't take time to rest that I needed to. And the reality is I let my own system get weakened in the process of that and ended up being in a situation where I didn't have a choice. Right. So let's look at so I mentioned Moses earlier. And one of the things that Moses is most known for is the Ten Commandments. And there's this one that says to honor the Sabbath and keep it holy. You know, we're charged to give ourselves time and space. We're charged to give ourselves time and space for divine rest, because the body wasn't designed to just go and go and go and go without rest. The mind wasn't designed to just go and go and go and go without rest. If that wasn't the case, you wouldn't have a need to ever sleep, right? But we all do. All right, greetings, Curly Conscious King. Good to see you in the space today. All right, so let's look at, I want to take a moment right now and look at the collective consciousness of those who fall in the category of healers and caregivers. All right? Because there are thoughts that flow in the ethers that your antenna picks up on. Sometimes you've got stuff going on in your head that isn't even your thoughts. And this can manifest itself subconsciously, just like if you turn on the radio, you get the signal based on the frequency that you've tapped into, but that frequency is being broadcast in a wide spread manner, right? So it's similarly with the collective consciousness of humanity, kind of like the 100th monkey thing, right? And so let's look at in terms of healing with respect to the collective consciousness of those who consider ourselves healers and caregivers, or those who circumstantially fall into those categories. Greetings, Ketrin. Good to see you in the place as well today. Yes, I will make sure that I get some self-care. Yeah, I shared earlier that I messed around and got COVID. All right, so let's see. as it relates to the collective consciousness of healers and caregivers. Let's transmute the thought process, the belief system that we're being faithful to our craft by being unfaithful to ourselves. Right? There are people who are caregivers who feel guilty, about wanting to have some time to themselves. All right. And you could be that caregiver could go in a lot of different ways. It could be, an aging parent or spouse. It could be someone who's raising children, young children. And you may feel guilty about having actual time to yourself or to be able to have a break. What did Nell Carter say? Give me a break. I might have to go back and watch that show sometime. All right, so let's look at subconscious sense of guilt and even shame about wanting to take time for self. All right, and transmute that guilt and that shame into self-acceptance. Let's boost and strengthen that. Into self-acceptance and into, the awakened reality that it is a way that you get to love God. Okay. All right, I want to look at the subconscious belief system that makes you think that it makes you weak to need care yourself. And so with respect to that, let's look at some subconscious judgment that we might have on others who need care. All right. If we're somehow thinking that somebody else who needs care is less than, then we're not going to necessarily be as receptive to receiving the care ourselves, even in terms of self-care, necessary self-care. And particularly for the healer, who sees it as a weakness, you may mess around and find out. All right. All righty. All right, so let's look at kind of creating a new programming in our thought process that says that the more I love on myself, the bigger blessing I get to be. The more I love on myself, the bigger blessing that I get to be. The more committed I am to my own well-being, the more authentic space I actually have to be there for other people. Now, let's get for a moment with the subconscious part of you that doesn't want to be there for other people because you've got some resentment about it. You've got some resentment about sacrificing your own needs to take care of somebody else. So let's address that subconscious resentment, transmute that into self-forgiveness, because you're not really resentful towards that other person simply because of that other person or what that other person's needs are. The real root of your resentment is towards yourself because of the decisions that you chose to make. And then you want to blame the other person for it because you don't want to take responsibility for the fact that you are irresponsible towards yourself. All right. So let's address that and transmute that resentment into forgiveness, self-forgiveness, and forgiveness of the other. And genuine, deep, authentic acceptance. All right. Okay, and so now let's take a moment and look at like anger and resentment and unforgiveness towards God. Okay, it's definitely coming up as a weakness. All right. And so sometimes we subconsciously blame God for the things that are going on in our life because God allowed it to happen. All right. Here's a little truth bomb. We're always given opportunities to listen and to hear. And God is never directing us to drive into a brick wall. Rather, God sees the brick wall ahead and finds ways to communicate to us, turn here. You need to turn. You need to course correct. You need to change your direction. You need to do something a little bit differently. And then because we don't choose to listen, or because we're smarter than God, we think, just telling it like it is, we think that we're going to be okay. So we can keep doing what it is that we've been doing, or keep going the way that it is that we've been going, even though we know that on some level, we know that it's not good for us, that we're feeling worn down or whatever the case might be. And then we end up crashing into that brick wall. And then we're mad at God because God allowed us to crash into the brick wall, when the reality is all the time God was encouraging us to steer in a different direction, right? And so let's do some forgiving God and forgiving ourselves for even having the need to forgive God. Most people need to forgive God. Most people are also not willing to acknowledge being mad at God in the first place, because you know subconsciously that that doesn't really make sense. But the reality of one's authentic life experience is that you're mad at God about some stuff that happened because God didn't keep it from happening. And the reality is that you might not have been in a headspace to listen, to hear, and to act accordingly. All right, so we're going to forgive God and forgive self. And have openness to really hear the directions that are being offered, the direction that's being offered in terms of what steps we might need to take, what the most healthy step we might need to take is, even if we don't necessarily see how it will work out. Okay. Yeah. Reverend Shearer says, I had that out of order for a long time. I thought putting others in front of me was the Christ way. Yeah, that's because we're taught that way. Yeah, we get programmed with that foolishness. Okay. All right, so let's look at, for a moment, I want to take a look at I want to look at self-loathing. All right. I want to transmute that self-loathing into self-love. Sometimes we develop negative feelings towards ourselves because of the ways that we've abandoned ourselves, because of the ways that we've lied to ourselves. Yes, tell yourself the truth. Ashe. So the key is to recognize the truth that you've abandoned yourself, but not to judge yourself for the ways that you've abandoned yourself in the past, but rather to just make a new decision, to forgive yourself for the unloving ways that you responded toward yourself, and to just make space to just do differently once you know better, to do better. I have a kind of have a basic belief system that everybody does the best they know in the moment, right? They may have other moments where they know better, but in the moment that a person's in, they're doing the best that they have access to in that moment, right? And not every moment is a stellar moment. Not every moment are we thinking soberly, right? So let's look at really having a deep, deep, deep sense of compassion for the version of ourselves who made some poor choices in the past. Recognizing that we made those poor decisions based on where it was that we were then, and where we were then was based on what we just still hadn't learned to work out yet. All right. And let's resolve the judgment that we knew better, or we should have known better, or we should have done differently, or we should have done better. So moving past that, to just have a genuine compassion for that version of you who allowed yourself to go through whatever negativity, whatever negative experiences that you may have drawn into your life experience because you didn't love yourself enough at the time. All right, I'm getting indications that my internet may be acting funny again, so hopefully we're still connected. All right. And to be able to make space within ourselves to receive other people being genuinely and authentically loving and compassionate towards us, because sometimes we overextend ourselves because we have experienced it in the past that that's how we get love, acceptance, and approval from other people. So we get rewarded for abandoning ourselves, right? And so it was a learned behavior for many of us. But again, to forgive ourselves for doing that, to forgive others who trained us to do that, and to be able to have the courage to be able to operate from a place of genuine authenticity to ensure that we're allowing our own needs to be met and that we can be loved in the midst of that. That we can be loved in the midst of that. It's never a good thing to abandon loving yourself in hopes to get somebody else's love, attention, affection, approval, or any of those things, right? All right. Okay. All right. So that's pretty much what's coming up for now. It's already 2:31 Eastern time. We're going to go ahead and close this out for today, but let's want to just lift a prayer up real quickly. God, thank you so much for everybody who's been here today and everybody who's received the healing. Thank you for all the healing that's gone forth today. Thank you for bringing us into clarity of awareness, for strengthening our resolve to do well by ourselves, and allowing us to make space to receive care from ourselves as well as from others, even though we might have responsibilities of caring for others as well. Thank you for the blessing of bringing us back into our right mind, for giving us permission to allow ourselves the gift of rest and fulfillment of the need of rest, and to know that that doesn't make us weak. It makes us self-loving. Thank you for all of the blessings that you so bountifully and continuously bestow upon us. Ashe and amen. All right, everybody. It certainly has always been a blessing being with you all today, as it is every Sunday. Again, sorry that we started late. I thought that we weren't going to be broadcasting. I even posted on Facebook eventually when I don't have much of a cell phone connection here either. it's hard sometimes to, when I don't have internet connection, to be able to put information out there. So it was almost 1:45 when we were able to start, when the internet magically started working again. But peace and blessings to all of you. I love you. I'm sending a bunch of love in your direction. And as we continue to endeavor to enter into that sustainable state of supreme satisfaction, I bid you adieu with peace and love. Catch you next time.